Hey guys, T-Star here, and welcome to every episode of Danny Phantom's Season 2 Reviewed. In this season, we have 14 22-minute episodes and 3 44-minute specials to sit through, so strap in for a long ride. Also, just like in Season 1, there will be spoilers. Heading into this, Season 2 is a bit of a wild card for me. I do remember liking certain episodes, but some of them, like King Tuck or Beauty Marks, I hadn't seen in years prior to making this review. I had a feeling I'd like Season 1 heading into that one, and that one will be really hard to top. But we'll just have to wait and see about Season 2. Not much has really changed from Season 1 to here as far as these videos are concerned. So, can Season 2 be as good as Season 1? Let's find out. Episode 21, Memory Blink. Desiree grants Sam's unintentional wish that she never met Danny, so he never got his powers and has to reacquire them. Fun fact, this is the second and final time in the entire series Desiree has a speaking role. She does appear in a few later episodes, but she doesn't have any lines. So Desiree from What You Want is back, and she's granting wishes again. One big notable thing about this episode, this is also when Danny gets the D logo on his suit, and he will have it for the rest of the series. The theme song at the beginning doesn't show him with it, but every other theme song for episodes aired after this one will show him with it. Butch Hartman says Nickelodeon did this because they wanted it to be more marketable and know what it is when you see a logo, very akin to the Batman logo. Because yeah, when you see that D logo, you definitely think of Danny Phantom. The episode basically starts off with a flashback of Danny getting his powers like we see in the opening intro, which is cool to see, and is very nice foreshadowing. Sam also made a wish that someone would destroy the Hummer-esque trucks that Danny and Tucker were looking at, and Desiree was there to grant it. Paulina has a funny but savage moment when she invites Danny and his friends to her birthday party. She says the ghost boy only appears where Danny is, and she had no choice but to invite him and his loser friends. Tucker says, "Hey, we're right here, you know." Yeah, I know. The episode kind of borrows from Attack of the Killer garage sale, where Danny gets invited to a popular kids party and puts them first over his friends, although Tucker's just as bad as him here. But at least that's not the main idea of the episode. And at the end of the episode, Danny does learn to keep his promise. Sam then makes an unintentional wish where something would happen to Paulina and the party got canceled, thus leading to a few ghosts trying to hurt Paulina. They then say, "Sam," after being defeated, making Danny think Sam sent them. And Sam ends up wishing that they never met. I think there could have been a more clever way to make it sound like Sam actually did send those ghosts to hurt Paulina. After Sam makes that wish, she was wearing the Spectre deflector, which appeared in Maternal Instinct, so she wasn't affected by it. And she spends a good portion of the episode getting Danny back on her side and getting his powers back. There's also a funny scene when Tucker hits on Sam since he was affected by the wish as well. This really worked to Desiree's advantage since there's a big meteor shower coming up and she wanted Danny out of the way. She gets more powerful with every wish she grants. It is kind of weird Sam knows what Desiree looks like since she was sick during What You Want, but maybe she saw a picture of her off screen once or something. The way Sam gets Danny to start talking to her again is very interesting. She dresses really attractive and then fights off a ghost that attacks the ice cream parlor they're at. It's interesting to see an in-episode way of seeing Danny get his powers. Good thing he didn't keep the Jack Fenton sticker on his suit. Sam also had nice foreshadowing earlier when she was drawing a D logo in class and puts it on Danny's suit before he re-enters the portal. I also really like the music of Danny walking into the ghost portal when he turns it on. This is also a return of the fake-out make-out, like what happened in Shades of Grey. In that same scene, Sam lies to Jack and tells him she's Paulina when he asks her who she is. So Jack says Danny's never allowed to see Paulina again, and that's kind of funny. Danny has to relearn his powers, like what happened in the first few episodes in Season 1, while trying to fight Desiree. Also, someone wished for evil plants for some reason. When Sam wishes she never originally made that wish, Desiree grants it happily for some reason, and I don't understand that. Yes, she gets more powerful, but then Danny would actually be a threat to her. And she gets shoved into the thermos immediately after. Also, when Danny decides to keep his promise to Sam about going to the movies, they talk in the theater for some reason. This episode is far from perfect, but it's enjoyable enough. It's a good episode. Episode 22, Doctor's Disorders. Ghost bugs infect the students at Casper High, and they get sent to an ominous hospital because of it, as it's a plot by Spectra to get the kid's best qualities for herself. Fun fact, this is the first episode we see Sam socks without her boots, because I honestly couldn't find any real fun facts about this episode. Not that the episode's bad or anything, I couldn't really find much. So the episode starts with Danny fighting a giant ghost mosquito, which ends up turning into many different mosquitoes, and they infect the other students at Casper High. We also learn that Tucker's afraid of hospitals, which will come into play later. There's a doctor named Dr. Burt Rand, which is foreshadowing if you're familiar enough with the series at this point, who says he's from the government and can transfer the kids to the creepy abandoned hospital at the edge of town. And if you don't trust him, they can audit your taxes. Insert COVID-19 joke here. There's also a funny but good foreshadowing scene when Jack tells Danny to hold his disgusting snot tissue and put it in his pocket for Spectra to use as DNA later in the episode, so her new human body is all gross. Tucker has a funny joke when he has a lipstick blaster and says he's worth it. So I guess L'Oreal is now sponsoring this show. Quan is also able to multiply when he gets ghost powers, and Danny is suddenly jealous since he's been trying to master that technique for months. I really like the subtle maternal instinct reference there. And I will say, it's nice to see Spectra and Bertrand again after how great My Brother's Keeper was. Her plan is really good too, where the virus she created helps power her new beautiful suit and gets the best qualities from people. Dash's muscles, Jazz's brain, Paulina's nearly flawless skin, with a mole, but when she gets Jack Fenton's gross tissue DNA from earlier, and becomes fat, she also gets tons of booger slime on her. It's pretty funny when Tucker does decide to help Danny after he was captured by Spectra and Bertrand. Danny calls for help a few times, and Tucker doesn't go in until Danny specifically shouts his name. Tucker's role in the episode is really cool, how he has to overcome his fear of hospitals to save Danny and the others. This episode also has a lot of really creepy imagery, like when Bertrand transforms into a giant monster with an exposed brain, or Jazz's head in a jar. I wish Fright Night had more of this. This is more of a Halloween episode than that one was. I think the ending's kind of stupid, though. I don't mind Tucker being in the hospital in the end, but he gets an old man roommate who wants to tell him all about his childhood and would do so for the next 2 weeks. For all Tucker did in the episode, he doesn't deserve that. I can tell they wanted a joke ending, but it's not funny. But I will say this is definitely a good episode. Episode 23, Pirate Radio. The adults in Amity Park get kidnapped by Youngblood and Ember, so Danny and the other kids work together to save their parents. So I like the plot of this episode, where popular music is used to lure the adults onto a pirate ship and be part of a crew. Plus, it's cool to see Ember as the main villain again. And I will also say, the episode does kind of remind me of the Jimmy Neutron movie, where the adults get kidnapped by aliens and the kids go after them. Maybe that movie inspired this episode. Not that I mind, of course. Although, I'm not really a big fan of the "you said booty" jokes at the beginning of the episode. But Youngblood stealing the Fenton Ghost Shield is pretty cool. And Danny's overall plan for everyone against the Ghost Pirates is pretty well thought out. Seems like he always has a really good plan for everything. And Dash's quote over there is really funny when he, Danny, and the other kids are fighting on the pirate ship. It's also interesting to see him and Danny as allies. And it's also cool to see Danny fighting in his human form and not his ghost form. He also has a funny line when he's in his ghost form and tells Paulina that Danny Fenton is really cool and she should totally make out with him. He also tells her that she should wrap her mind around the idea of Paulina Fenton. And then in the end of the episode, Youngblood and the others get trapped by a reverse ghost shield. But yeah, it's a pretty good episode. Not really a whole lot to say, just a very enjoyable episode. Special number 1, episode 24 to 25, Rainstorm. Vlad releases the Ghost King Pariah Dark, and Danny must defeat him. So, you remember how I said in The $1 Million Ghost about Vlad going after a special key? That set up this episode, where Vlad goes to Ghost King Pariah Dark's sarcophagus to acquire the Ring of Rage and the Crown of Fire, so he can have ultimate power. But he's no match for Pariah, and he also releases the Fright Knight to serve him. Speaking of the Fright Knight, he's way more interesting and entertaining in this episode than he was in his episode from last season. Vlad also tries to work out some deal with the Fright Knight, and I think it had something to do with the ending, and Vlad getting the battlesuit Jack works on in the episode. This is the last time in the series that the Fright Knight has a major role in an episode. He does appear in a few more episodes, but his role is very limited. Maybe that was a plan for a season 3 episode or something. Vlad, being all beat up, gets knocked through the Fenton portal, and he asks Jack and Maddie to help him. Tucker mentions Danny put Ember and Skulker into the ghost zone last night, so I guess Ember didn't completely get away in the previous episode after all. Danny starts using his powers to get revenge on Dash, more on this later, and he stuffs toilet paper into Dash's locker. I find it really funny that Jack is so egotistical that he even puts his face on toilet paper. Danny and Valerie help each other hide from Dash and Nathan. The latter was trying to ask Valerie to the senior prom 3 years in advance. They go to Danny's house and see Vlad there. That scene starts a really funny running joke of Vlad saying his upcoming evil plots, where he says he'd steal Jack's battlesuit right from under his nose, but make it look like he's kidding, and he sells the joke really well with his expression. He does this with Valerie later on as well, saying he'd have to be some sort of evil villain to manipulate her like that. This episode is also when Valerie finds out Vlad is the one that gave her the ghost equipment she has. Most of Danny's enemies escape through the ghost portal, including Skulker, Ember, the Box Ghost, and even Walker, which is weird that he's now friends with Skulker and the Box Ghost after he locked them up in Prisoners of Love. Technus is here as well, which I don't understand since he got trapped in level 0 of Teacher of the Year, and they even mention this in the next episode after this one. We even get to see Poindexter again, and he tells Danny that Skulker isn't the bully here. Vlad gives Valerie the Ring of Rage so Danny would be protecting her, and stealing the battlesuit Jack was working on would be simple. And also to hide it from the Fright Night. Going back to Danny standing up for himself, like in Splitting Images, I don't think it's ripping off that episode, because in this episode, he's unintentionally becoming like Vlad, where he uses his powers against people he doesn't like and throws out the first punch, and he has to learn not to do those things. We then see a really entertaining scene of Jack fighting the Fright Night after he comes through the portal, and he almost kidnaps Maddie. But Jack fights him with the pants part of the battle suit that drains him like a battery. Then Maddie asks Vlad to help her get the pants off Jack, and he says, "Nope, sorry, that's all you." We then have a scene where Danny's foes try to find places to hide. The box ghost hides in a box shop and actually manages to scare two people wanting boxes. Glad they actually threw him a bone for once. Ember hides in a guitar shop, and the people watching her before she scares them away look very similar to the crowd in Fanning the Flames. And Skulker hides in a hunting store. Vlad comes to Danny's school to help him fight the Fright Night and many skeleton ghosts. It's very interesting that Vlad's pretty much an anti-hero in this episode, and it's also interesting to see him fight alongside Danny for once. Valerie also arrives to help alongside Danny and Vlad. We get a very entertaining scene of those three fighting the Fright Night and other ghosts, and the Fright Night puts the town under the rule of Lord Pariah. Maddie almost sees Vlad and Danny in their ghost form, so they both flee, including Vlad using his cape disappear trick like he did in Bitter Reunions. I really wish he'd do that more often. That's such a cool ability he has. Danny then encounters his other ghost foes, and Skulker explains Pariah's backstory, how if he has the Crown of Fire, Ring of Rage, he could do anything. But a group of powerful ghosts defeated him and locked him in the sarcophagus of forever sleep. We also get a scene where the Ghost King arrives and knocks out Danny and Vlad, and Valerie has to save them both. But Pariah gets the ring in that same scene, so he now aims to rule the human world as well as the ghost zone. The Fentons finish the battle suit, and Valerie wants to use it, but Danny stops her from doing it so he can use it to battle Pariah by pulling her mask off so her dad finds out about her ghost hunting. Danny takes the suit so he can battle the skeleton army, and most importantly, Pariah. And of course, Danny's enemies like Skulker and Ember help fight the army. Even the box ghost helps fight, and he uses his hilarious new weapon, the Bubble Wrap of Death! Which we learn later that he just stole that from the box store he was at. Danny fights Pariah in the battle suit, and he's doing the best he can while the suit is draining him. Although he does finally master the multiply trick that Vlad and Quan in Doctor's Disorders has. It's one of the most entertaining battle scenes of the whole show. Vlad helps Danny lock Pariah into the sarcophagus of forever sleep, and we see the Fright Night with all of Danny's foes. Maybe Vlad talked to him off screen about that deal from earlier, since that battlesuit does reappear in a certain episode later this season. We also get that genius quote over there where Vlad suggests that this was all a chess match. Vlad brought Danny home where he wakes up in his bed, and Maddie no longer hates him after doing this, at least for the time being. She spent the beginning of the episode pouring hot tea on him after what happened in Maternal Instinct. Danny also learned during the episode to use his powers more responsibly and be less like Vlad, because he can easily be just as power hungry and bitter as him if he's not careful. This episode has such a great plot, a great story, it's very entertaining, and it definitely does fill up the double episode minute runtime. It's a good episode. Now to review Identity Crisis. But first... Alright, we'll change it back. Episode 26, Identity Crisis. Danny uses the Fenton ghost catcher to split his ghost half from his human half, so he can have a personal life while also chasing down Technus. The episode starts with Danny, Tucker, and Sam looking on Danny's computer and seeing which ghosts are in the ghost zone, and they say, "Who cares?" when they look at the box ghost, and he comes out of the ghost portal saying, "Hey, I have feelings too, you know." When Danny's hard drive gets full, he decides to delete an old copy of the video game they played in Teacher of the Year, unintentionally releasing Technus. Once freed, he starts a hilarious running joke of him drawing a mustache and glasses on pictures of people. He does this with Danny's picture of Paulina posing on his computer, then gets synchronized into Tucker's PDA where he downloaded that same picture, and Technus does it there too. Jack even had a similar pose in a picture he gave to Maddie, and no, not the other way around. And that in and of itself is really funny. And Technus does it to Jack too. The three of them wanted a weekend of fun without ghosts, but Technus ruined that. He also ends up taking over the Fenton RV when Jack was driving the kids to the movies. Once Danny splits himself, we get a Danny Fenton and a Danny Phantom separate from each other. Danny Fenton becomes a lazy party boy with a new hairstyle, while Danny Phantom becomes a superhero, uses a bedsheet as a cape, and is really full of himself. There's also a scene where you see top and bottom scenes of both Dannys. Fenton is going bowling and sleeping, while Phantom is fighting Technus all night. There's also a funny scene when Jack sees Danny Phantom on TV and says, Danny would want to see this. Jazz tries to cover for him like she usually does, then sees Danny Fenton walk in the kitchen. Jazz from this point starts to think she's nuts, especially later in the episode when they try the ghost catcher again to fuse together and just makes two similar looking Dannys when Jazz sees this. Phantom gets help from Fenton in shutting Technus down, and he decides they should merge back together, but he just overshadows Fenton. The whole scene of two Dannys being upstairs is really funny, as Tucker and Sam try not to get Danny's parents to notice the two Dannys. Then Technus invades the house technology, and both Dannys are limited in their power. One can fly and one can't, one can turn intangible and the other can't, and so on. The fight between two Dannys against Technus is really entertaining, although Technus somehow grew a mullet once the ghost catcher gets him out of the house technology. And once Jazz only sees one Danny and says she's not nuts, Maddie makes a really funny comment to Jack saying, "Ooh, that's what you said when you proposed to me." And then Jack said, "And you still said yes. Who's nuts now, huh?" It's a good episode. It's a very interesting plot with a lot of good jokes. Episode 27, The Fenton Menace. Nice Star Wars reference there, Nickelodeon. Jazz suggests the Fentons go on vacation to get away from ghosts after Danny keeps seeing Youngblood, who can't be seen by adults. So, fun fact, this episode aired after The Ultimate Enemy, where Danny finds out Jazz knows his secret. Danny doesn't know about that in this episode, and this is why I review the episodes in production order rather than airing order. So, I was wrong when I said in What You Want that episode and Fright Before Christmas had narration in it. I hadn't seen this episode in years, honestly, and I didn't remember Jazz narrating this. Oh well. So the episode starts off with Jazz's narration, and it looks like Danny is fighting someone that's not there. Interesting way to start the episode. Jazz believes it all started when the family used the Spectre speeder to drive underwater, and they see the pirate ship from pirate radio there. And Danny sees a ghost, but nobody else does. So he takes the controls and drives away, and also destroying the pirate ship, thus freeing Youngblood and any other ghosts on there. Jazz also has that great quote over there. When at school, after Tucker introduces the alibi-o-matic, which simulates sounds, Danny sees a ghost not shown on screen in his school, and Jazz tries to prevent him from going ghost in his delicate state of mind. But Danny has a really trollish moment to evade her by going into the boys' bathroom. He fights a ghost in there and making tons of noises, and Mr. Lancer walks by the bathroom and has a really funny line saying, "If that's your brother in there, I suggest he gets more fiber in his diet." Jazz suggests they go on a camping trip, as she says, studies show connecting with nature has a calming effect on troubled teens, and the toxic home environment is making Danny a nervous wreck. Right before they go on the trip, Danny sees the ghost, but for some reason, Tucker and Sam don't, even though they were able to see Youngblood in pirate radio. I'm not sure why they were even in this scene. That's really the only problem I have with this episode. Youngblood attacks the Fenton RV, and we actually do get to see him on screen here. Danny put the alibi-o-matic in the bathroom, and while he's fighting, Jazz has a funny scene covering for him, saying he's really sick and needs to sleep it off. All of a sudden he's sick, and he's sleeping in the bathroom. I mean, it's okay, I'll buy it. Jazz decides to have a constant watch on Danny since she thinks he's going nuts, and Youngblood trolls him and almost hurts Jazz a few times. But Danny is great at thinking on the spot and stops him a few times before he's able to hurt Jazz. She then locks him in the Fenton RV, and he has to get Jazz to act like a kid in order for her to see Youngblood and know he's not crazy. Youngblood's parrot ghost, who's a horse in this episode, pushes the tent Jack and Maddie were sleeping in into a river followed by a waterfall. And even though Jack was wearing a flannel shirt earlier, he once again sleeps in his orange jumpsuit with pajamas over them. I love Jack Fenton. The climax of Jazz helping Danny fight Youngblood is awesome. Jazz driving the Fenton assault vehicle to attack Youngblood, along with a lesson learned where it's okay to be a kid every now and again, is just really good. It's a good episode. Special number 2. Hold on, let's get that good episode rating out of here for a second. Okay, there we go. Episode 28 to 29, The Ultimate Enemy. Danny learns about his horrible future where he turns evil, along with his friends and family being dead, so he must prevent all of that from happening. Alright, let's put the good episode rating back onto there. Yeah, it's The Ultimate Enemy. Did you really expect this to get anything but a good? I mean, for crying out loud, this is considered one of the best episodes of the entire show, and definitely for good reason. Okay, so a few things to note before I go over in detail how amazing this episode is. First of all, the title card is incredible. It's so brutal, so much attention to detail, how his clothes are ripped. It just looks great. It just shows how intense this episode is going to be. Dark Danny has a pitch-perfect design and voice. I love hearing him speak. And he has so many great lines here. Eric Roberts voiced him perfectly. The music is also top-notch in this episode. Some of the best, if not the best, in the whole series. And you might as well start a drinking game for every time I say the word Danny in this review, because, spoiler alert, that's going to happen a lot. Okay, let's go into detail. The beginning shows Amity Park, 10 years in the future, where Valerie is still ghost hunting, and she's the only defense against an evil Danny Phantom, who we later learn is Danny and Vlad's ghost halves fused together. He even has the Fright Knight working for him. We get introduced to the Master of Time Ghost Clockwork and some other ghosts he works with, who suggest to save the future, present-day Danny Phantom must die. We then go to present-day Amity Park, where we learn there's a big CAT test coming up that will help decide the students' futures, and Danny at first is struggling to study for it. Jack sees this and has a really funny line saying he failed it, but he didn't turn out to be a cat. But while doing that, Clockwork brings a ghost from the future to the past to test Danny, the daughter of the box ghost and the lunch lady. Ew. He has a lot more faith in Danny than the other ghosts, so he believes he'll make the right choices when prompted. While fighting her, he unintentionally gets the test answers from Mr. Lancer, and Clockwork knows exactly what's going to happen after that. And I mean exactly what's going to happen. Right before he opens the answers to study them, another future ghost appears, Skulltech 9.9, a fusion of Skulker and Technus. Now that's a scary combo. After their entertaining fight and 2 funny flagpole jokes, Skulltech's medallion falls off, sending him back to where Clockwork is, and Danny, Tucker, and Sam go with him, and they learn about Danny being evil in the future. Danny attempts to fight Clockwork, but he keeps freezing time, and Tucker saves Danny, you'll see later why I say it like that, with one of the medallions, and they escape to the future, where he has to fight Dark Danny. Tucker and Sam escape to the past after taking off their medallions, but Dark Danny puts one of them inside present Danny to keep him there. He also goes back and disguises himself as Danny Fenton, so that timeline won't be different from his at all. He also throws good Danny into the ghost zone. Dark Danny convinced Sam and Tucker he's present-day Danny, and the actual one floats to future versions of his foes. They even made the future box ghost scary. He learns the ghostly whale power Dark Danny has and stops them along with freeing himself. Jazz also thinks she's confronting present Danny about cheating on the test, but Dark Danny reveals himself to her and knocks her out so she can't stop him. He also gets the genius quote, "How? Is the answer A, the Fenton portal? Destroyed it. B, the only remaining portal? The one my idiot cheesehead arch rival has? As soon as I find it, that's going to. Is it C, you? No. You can't stop me from cheating on the CAT and solidifying my future, so it must be D! None of the above! Well, what do you know? The answer to the first question is D! I would have had that be the quote over there, but it's too long, so it'll be the highlight instead. Jazz writes a note and attaches it to a boomerang that hones in on Danny's ectoplasmic manner, and it reaches him to tell him what to do, so he goes to Vlad's portal, and he explains that after an explosion killed Danny's friends and family, he was the only person left on the entire planet that could possibly understand his situation. That Danny wanted to make the hurt go away, so he asks Vlad to rip the ghost out of him. But then Danny's ghost half rips the ghost out of Vlad as well, and merges with Vlad's evil ghost half, killing Danny Fenton and destroying the castle in the process. Although, I'm not really sure how Vlad survived his destroyed castle, but Danny didn't. But then Vlad explains that not having ghost powers made him realize what a fool he had been. Vlad became power hungry when he got ghost powers and had no one around him to keep him good. But I won't get into Vlad's character here. Vlad helps Danny get back to his past, and Dark Danny, disguised as present Danny, cheats on the CAT. Mr. Lancer figured he would after seeing he didn't have the answer sheet, so he calls Danny's parents to meet him at the Nasty Burger to talk to them about it. But the Nasty Burger could be blowing up at any point now. Jazz uses the Fenton peeler from My Brother's Keeper to expose Dark Danny, but he traps them all at the Nasty Burger where it's about to explode, just like in his timeline. But present Danny returns to fight back, and boy is this action intense and entertaining. Dark Danny then gets trapped in the thermos, and right as the Nasty Burger explodes, Clockwork intervenes and saves them all. Danny proved himself to Clockwork, that he now won't turn into that horrible version of himself. He also knew this was all going to happen. He showed images of present-day Danny fighting Skulltech, Dark Danny, and even Jazz using the Fenton peeler suit. It's very akin to what Doctor Strange did in Infinity War. He then transports them to right when the CAT test is happening and lets them take it from there. So he gives the answer sheet back to Mr. Lancer and agrees to take a makeup test next week. And of course, now knowing Jazz knows the secret and has a very nice chat with her about it. The ghosts he works with say Clockwork manipulated his choice and that he cheated, and Clockwork tells his coworkers that he cheated, yes, but Danny made the choices on his own. The themes of future and cheating played so well in this episode. And I will say, the time travel stuff in this episode isn't written perfectly, as they think killing present-day Danny would completely erase future Danny, but present Danny saving his friends and family later in the episode doesn't erase future Danny either. He even got a new ghost power in the episode, which he has for the rest of the series. That future alternate reality still happened, but now it doesn't have Dark Danny tormenting it anymore, so I'm okay with the time travel stuff not being 100% perfect here. It's still written really well. This is probably already by far the most complicated episode of the entire show, but it's still simple enough to understand, and most of all appreciate. It's kind of a shame we don't get to see Dark Danny again for the remainder of the series, especially after the cliffhanger ending when he seems like he's going to bust out of the Fenton thermos where Clockwork is. Episode 30, The Fright Before Christmas. Danny hates Christmas and ruins a poem from the ghostwriter, so he ends up being trapped in a rhyming exciter. Oh boy, I was looking forward to talking about this episode, that I can tell. Reason being, because this episode is quite swell. Will Arnett is a guest star as he voices the ghostwriter. His talents are so good, it makes the story brighter. Danny hates the holidays and has had enough, so he goes to the ghost zone to destroy Christmas stuff. His parents fight every year about Santa being real. Maddie thinks no, but Jack thinks Santa is the real deal. Danny accidentally destroys the poem the writer was working on, but when he learns it was Christmas related, he cheers upon. Most of the episode is told in rhyme, so I decided to copy the idea while in my prime. The rhymes are excellent, so detailed and smart. The writers here did a great job on their part. Even when Danny tries to avoid it, other characters simply commit. I will admit though, with the dog peeing on Danny as a baby, the writing was low. But fortunately, everything else goes with a good flow. There's a scene he fights ghost reindeer and they escape, so the town puts Danny mentally in bad shape. There's also a fun scene when the writer brings to life Christmas toys, and to this audience member, it brings many joys. Although Mr. Lantern gets hit by his toy train, oh boy, that must bring a lot of pain. Danny then fights a live ghost trees on the spot, and when Maddie goes out to save Danny, Jack says, "Oh man, that is hot!" Danny even uses his new ghostly wail, and does so without fail. He then goes to the ghost zone and sees a lot of his foes, but a ghostly truce on Christmas is how it goes. Technus appears again with the other ghosts, but the writers again excluded him from having any quotes. Walker only has 2 lines the whole season, and they're both in this episode, for some reason. Danny tells him the writer broke the truce and is off his nut. Then the box ghost hilariously says, "Let's go kick his butt!" The writer controls them to fight each other, and Danny uses an orange to ruin his writing. Using that to stop him is very exciting. The writer goes to the ghost zone prison, but the story isn't fully arisen. The poem goes on until the lesson is learned. Danny rhymes until his Christmas spirit is returned. The other ghosts help Danny restore Christmas spirit to Amity Park, and return presents before they embark. The music in this scene is remixed, all peaceful and catchy. This complements the scene well, and certainly makes me happy. In the ending scene, Walker gives an orange to the writer, causing him to freak as he would. Oh, and also, I commend this episode. For that, it is good. Episode 31, Secret Weapons. Jazz tries to help Danny catch ghosts, but doesn't do well, and tricks Vlad into thinking she's now on his side. Fun fact, this is the first, second, and third time Danny gets caught in the Fenton thermos. So the title card is a little bit misleading, as we don't see Vlad in his ghost form a whole lot in the episode. He's mostly going around as Vlad Masters. Also interestingly enough, the $1 Million Ghost set up Rainstorm, and Rainstorm set up this episode, where Vlad has Jack's battlesuit. Now that Danny knows about Jazz knowing his secret, she decides to start helping him out, but she's not very good at it. I guess she got a bit rusty since maternal instinct. This leads to her accidentally shoving Danny into the thermos twice, and hitting him with the anti-creep stick from 13, then later in a fight against Skulker, getting him in the thermos again. Although, he does that to himself to save Jazz the trouble. Skulker is looking for certain items, where we learn later that he was helping Vlad out. He took the battlesuit the Fentons had in Rainstorm, but Jack made an ecto-converter so that gives the suit power on its own. That way it doesn't drain the person using it like a battery. Jazz tells Skulker what the ecto-converter is, and Skulker even says he likes Danny's new helper. Danny eventually snaps on her, but he ends up feeling pretty bad about it, especially when Jazz runs away. She goes to Wisconsin to live with Vlad, although Danny thinks she was going after Skulker. It is kind of weird to see Vlad's castle again since it blew up in the $1 Million Ghost, but maybe he just bought another one or it got fixed off screen. Jazz calls her parents to tell them she can't be around Danny and she's going to stay with Vlad for a bit. Vlad then picks up the phone, and right when Maddie is about to say, "Absolutely not!" Vlad interrupts her after she says absolutely and says, "Absolutely fantastic!" and has a really funny expression when he says this. And also, my favorite joke of the entire show. Jack says, "Jazz is in Wisconsin, Danny's busy skulking, we have the house to ourselves. I'll get the checkerboard!" And what makes this joke even funnier is Maddie's expression where she's just angry about it. I love humor like that. This entire scene alone makes this a good episode. But, of course, there's plenty more to like about it too. Vlad's really happy about all this and is about to have a lawyer fill out the adoption papers. He's finally getting some love in his life, so he's thrilled about this. And Jazz is actually deceiving Vlad and wants to find out what he's up to with the ecto-converter and the bloodstream nanobots Skulker stole earlier in the episode. Although, the nanobots seem to be a bit of a plot convenience, since I'm not sure why else Vlad would want those. Once Skulker brings Danny to Vlad, he has him fight Jazz in the battlesuit and threatens to waste Jazz with the nanobots if she betrays him. They have a fake fight and attack Vlad when his guard is down, and of course, Jazz calling Vlad a Fruit Loop. Danny's able to get the remote from Vlad, and the suit self-destructs on him. Jazz tells Danny she would let him do the ghost fighting, and Maddie beat Jack in checkers, and gloats about it a lot. The episode has Jazz learn a lesson. She realizes she was wrong to help Danny when he really didn't need her help, at least in that way. Danny becomes more appreciative of her, The episode has great action, and of course, some of the funniest moments in the entire show. Episode 32, Flirting with Disaster. Danny and Valerie start dating, unbeknown that Technus is pushing them together to keep Danny away from his latest plan for global domination. So, fun fact. In a way, this is the 4th episode in a row Technus appears in. He fused together with Skulker, an ultimate enemy. He appears in the Fright Before Christmas with no lines, and has a brief scene in the last episode where Skulker stole his lightning rod. Technus starts the episode fighting Danny and has a really good foreshadowing moment where he says emotion is Danny's biggest weakness, and realizes he and Valerie like each other. He uses that to his advantage as he's able to figure out Danny's biggest weakness. Valerie also wanted to hunt both of them, but her dad found out she was hunting ghosts in Rainstorm, so he took her equipment away. Tucker, being the techno geek that he is, knows a lot about a supercomputer satellite, which Technus hears about and wants it for himself since it can control every computer in the world. It also requires a 10,000-digit security code, and Technus needs time to figure that out, so he starts pushing Danny and Valerie together. There's a montage of them dating, and I know Technus is just doing it to distract Danny, but it kind of feels like he actually wants to help him out. He uses his electric powers to win them 2 free tickets to the carnival and lights up a building so it says DF and VG. One thing I find very interesting about Valerie is that she's the exact opposite of Paulina. Paulina doesn't like Danny Fenton, but she likes Danny Phantom. Valerie, on the other hand, likes Danny Fenton, but doesn't like Danny Phantom. Danny is also aware that he can't ever tell Valerie his secret, but he's perfectly okay with it. Later in the episode, Technus is using Valerie's suit to attack Danny Fenton, and Valerie sees this and fights him. She's a 9th degree black belt and holds her own even against the suit's weapons. Sure, she's not able to beat him, and Danny Phantom has to beat him later on, but she put up a really good fight. Technus is able to beam Valerie and give her a new suit to distract Danny from his plan, and Danny borrows a jetpack and space helmet from Action Labs, so he gets to be an astronaut for a bit in this episode, which he always wanted to do. That's pretty cool. Once Technus is able to take over every electrical product over the world, he does some really funny things with it, like scare a bus driver with his body peeping out of a crosswalk sign, and many of his heads coming out of a computer shop in Japan. Once Technus gets defeated, Valerie decides to stop dating Danny because she feels her life's too complicated and doesn't want Danny to get hurt. Just like with Lucky in Love, this could have been a very soap opera-y episode, but they still focus on the action and humor as well. Although I do buy the love aspect in this episode. I think they wrote that really well. It's a good episode. Episode 33, Micromanagement. Jack accidentally shrinks Danny, Dash, and Skulker, along with the shrinking slowly depleting Danny's powers, so he must rely on his natural physical abilities to get to the Ops Center to reverse the shrinkage before his secret identity is revealed while also fighting off Skulker. Fun fact, this is the only episode in the entire show where Dash appears on the title card. Not really sure why he's glowing in it though. I really like the plot of this episode, where Danny learns he needs to improve his natural abilities, and he needs them in this episode, since his powers fade pretty quickly here. Plus, Skulker's battlesuit works perfectly fine while being shrunk. They even have really good foreshadowing in the beginning, where Danny, Tucker, and Sam are preparing for a presidential fitness test, and they get attacked by Skulker, but easily defeat him while saying he should rely on his natural abilities. And he is also pretty powerless without his battlesuit. We also get to see Skulker upgrade his battlesuit and weapons, so Danny has to go against that as well. I also like the moral it teaches, where you should try and stay in shape and physical fitness is important. Although I probably need to go to the gym more often. Danny gets to team up with Dash for the fitness test, and Tucker has a funny quote where he says if Dash fails, that would ruin his stellar D- GPA. Then Danny has a funny response saying, "You don't have superpowers. You don't get to be hilarious." Skulker arrives, and Danny tries to get away from Dash by intentionally badly acting, saying, "Run! It's a ghost!" And Jack hears this while working on his Fenton Crammer, which shrinks people, and hilariously says, "It sounds like Danny's in mortal danger from some ghost." Cool! Jack then shrinks Danny, Skulker, and Dash last for some reason. He already shrunk the 2 ghosts he believed to be a threat. Why shrink Dash after all that? Maybe instead his bad aim would have gotten Dash first or second. I know Jack's an idiot sometimes, but I'm sure he'd know Dash is a human. He was one of the Ghostketeers after all. They have met before. It's not a big deal though. I love how big the outside world is around them when they're small. The animation is great here. They go into a mouse hole in the house, and Dash has a funny question about where the matchbox sofa and coffee table made by a spool of thread are at. Danny then has that ironic quote over there. There's also a funny scene of Jack playing golf inside, but he's probably the worst golfer ever. Danny even says the only safe place is the hole. Skulker flies up the building, and Danny uses a bag of chips to stall him. I like how that's a subtle way of showing chips are bad for you. Once they're big again, Danny ends up briefly being happy Dash was his fitness buddy and thinking he's not so bad after all. But then Dash ruins it by suggesting they dunk Fenter's head in the toilet for giggles. But Danny makes him small again for saying that. There's also a subplot of Sam having to whip Tucker into shape for that same fitness test. Very akin to life lessons. And Sam has the newest PDA, motivating Tucker to try and get it from her. That techno geek will do anything for a new PDA, but it ended up being a fake. Danny and Tucker also both end up passing the test in the end. And speaking of life lessons, this episode is, in general, pretty similar to that one, where Danny has to work with someone that's not normally his ally, Tucker and Sam have a subplot, and Skulker's the main villain. But it's still a very good episode regardless. Episode 34, Beauty Marked. Sam enters her school's beauty pageant to show her disgust for them, unbeknownst that this is a ploy by Dora the Dragon Ghost to find a wife for her brother. So we saw the Cinderella Dragon Ghost a few times in the series, but here we actually learn her name and get to know a little bit more about her. But I'm just going to come out and say it, I don't have strong feelings towards this episode. I don't mind watching it, but it's not something I would really seek out to watch. But onto the episode itself. Danny gets chosen as the beauty pageant judge, and all the women in school participating want to get on Danny's good side. Paulina bakes him cookies, and Star, who's now voiced by Tara Strong apparently, does all of his math homework until next semester. Sam hates beauty pageants since she thinks they turn smart, opinionated women into shallow doormats. The lady running it, Dora, vows to make him forget that they're smart and just make them princesses. Danny really enjoys the popularity, and even Tucker gets in on the action. Although Danny did just date Valerie a few episodes ago. Not really sure why he's suddenly into Paulina again. Danny constantly has to fight medieval ghosts and has tons of axe puns, but I don't really find any of them funny. Sam unintentionally gets selected as the winner and gets hauled off to the ghost zone to marry Dora's arrogant brother, Prince Aragon, who wants what nobody else has, a human bride. Sam dresses in all black and acts like a party animal, so Aragon won't want her. That scene is kind of funny, though. Danny and Tucker try to save her, but they just end up ruining her plan to escape. Also, what happened to the amulet from parental bonding, where it turns you into a dragon when mad? Now they have necklaces where they can turn into dragons whenever they want. Danny versus Aragon as a dragon in the end is kind of entertaining, along with Dora versus Aragon. And Sam convinces Dora that women opinions matter, and Aragon's been treating her like trash the whole time, which, I mean, that in itself is okay. But yeah, I don't really think it's that exciting of an episode. It has an okay moral, okay action, but that's really about it. So, if it isn't obvious enough, I'm going to be giving this episode a meh. Episode 35, King Tuck. Tucker gets no attention when he runs for student body president, including from Danny and Sam, but a mummy ghost gives him a scepter that gives him power. Oh boy, this episode. So, the beginning of this episode is really stupid. They keep hammering the fact that nobody, including Tucker's friends, are listening to him. And it's only in this episode for some reason. I mean, yeah, he helps save a lot of people in doctor's disorders, but no. Let's not listen to anything he says. I mean, he's not important or anything. A mummy ghost awakens in the museum that they go to on a field trip, and Tucker looks like an ancient pharaoh from 4,000 years ago, who also wore glasses apparently. So the mummy ghost obeys Tucker. Danny also just attacks the mummy ghost before figuring out his motives. I guess he's still throwing out first punches. Sure, the mummy ghost does end up being evil, but he just walks out of the sarcophagus and Danny assumes he's evil. Tucker starts off being power hungry and smug and just abusing his new minion. I feel like he started doing this way too early, and it should have been later on after he gets the scepter when his personality changes. And I don't like his quote where he says, "I asked for something and it happens." Is that so hard? Maybe if it was for something simple and not much, this would work better. But he has the mummy ghost feed him grapes and fly him to school, along with giving him a bad attitude at first when he's late. The mummy ghost does have a funny line where he says Tucker is royalty and this poorly funded educational center could be his, when he's talking about the school, and the music and sound effects sell this joke pretty well. Too bad that and one other joke later in the episode are the only things that I like. The mummy ghost gives Tucker a powerful scepter that alters his personality, but for this episode's sake, I don't think it changed Tucker a whole lot. This episode also feels a little bit mean-spirited at times heading into this. And this is also a plot by the mummy ghost to turn everyone, Tucker included, into his minions. Tucker can suddenly control the scepter and control its powers as it sends Danny to a Colosseum in Egypt, even though that's more of an Italy thing, for trying to stop Tucker from turning evil. Very akin to What You Want, but at least in that episode, they were still lighthearted fun. Tucker then transports everyone to ancient Egypt for some reason, where they're working on a sphinx of him. Dash does have a funny line where he says, "We're doing manual labor for a geek we used to make fun of? This isn't supposed to happen till we're like 30! The mummy ghost makes his move when he controls the sphinx, and even Danny's ghostly whale can't stop it. But Tucker is able to get it to listen to him after Danny apologizes for not listening. In the end, Tucker concedes to Dash for student body president, and Dash proposes nerd-willing Fridays. Although I'm not really sure why Mr. Lancer is okay with that. The ending is also really stupid. The scepter apparently didn't make people completely forget what happened, and after Tucker was saying his tech was handmade in Japan, Paulina and Star hear this, and they think he called them handmaidens, and they want to beat him up. Plus, after Danny and Sam say they do a better job listening, they get easily annoyed by a few things Tucker says and just leave, hurting the idea of this episode teaching people to listen to others. This episode is mean-spirited, non-eventful, boring, forgettable, and completely botches the moral, along with giving Tucker a bad ending for some reason. Yeah, we're finally here. This is officially the first
Piechart episode
of the series. Episode 36, Masters of All Time. When Vlad infects Tucker and Sam with the same ectoarachne he has, Danny goes back in time to prevent Vlad from getting his ghost powers. The episode begins with Jack and Maddie reliving their college days by dressing in outdated 80s lingo, and Jack even carries a boombox with him. This sets up Danny wanting to live in a normal family and learning he should be happy with what he has. That itself is a good moral, but this episode has problems. Vlad gets the ectoarachne again and coaxes Danny into helping him by also giving it to Tucker and Sam. This gives Danny the idea of going back in time to prevent Vlad from getting his ghost powers, so we get to see Clockwork again. Clockwork tells him it's a horrible idea and changing time can have dire consequences. But Danny goes back in time anyway and stops Vlad from getting hit by the ghost portal blast, but Jack gets hit by that instead and becomes Jack Plasmius, along with Maddie marrying Vlad. And from here on out, there's two different ways I want to talk about this episode. First off, I'm going to talk about all the time travel stuff. And I can't talk about the time travel stuff in this episode without also talking about the ultimate enemy. So, Danny created a timeline in which he gets transported to where Jack and Vlad's lives switched places. But Danny still exists. And he even shows this reality's Jack a photo of the Fenton family. Vlad and Maddie didn't have any kids, and neither did Jack. I feel like the time travel writing is very confused here. I'd be fine with this following alternate dimension theory, but they don't really go for that here. They do mention the words alternate timeline, but why is he stuck here like this is the new normal? Plus, in Ultimate Enemy, Danny's horrible future still happened in some way since he met Clockwork in that episode and used the ghostly whale a few times since then. So there, they do suggest alternate reality does exist. I also feel the time travel stuff worked better in that episode since he was trying to prevent his horrible future from becoming this timeline's reality. I feel like going into the future plots generally work a lot better than going into the past ones. Ultimate Enemy obviously did this really well, and so did Samurai Jack. And then here comes part 2, where even if you don't think too hard about the time travel stuff and think, I don't know, maybe time travel works like this in this universe, I don't really want to get too complicated about it. Even with that, this episode still has other problems. When Danny goes to Jack's house, he tells him he's single and transforms into Jack Plasmius in front of him for some reason. When Jack explains what happened, his backstory is kind of funny, although I have no idea how he can suddenly control his powers. Vlad said before he was in the hospital for years after that incident in the original timeline, but that didn't happen to Jack for some reason. I mean, sure, he still has the ectoarachne even after all those years, but now he's perfectly fine apparently. Which I really don't understand, because before Danny went back in time, that same ectoarachne was killing Vlad along with Tucker and Sam. But Jack here is perfectly fine having it for all of those years. And Jack didn't do what Vlad did where he became rich, nor did he start plotting to steal Maddie from Vlad. He basically just tried to be a ghost-fighting superhero and then get rid of his powers. And this is a bit of a spoiler since Vlad explains this in a few episodes from now, but Vlad used his ghost powers to overshadow millionaires and give them their money, so he didn't actually earn that money. I say this now because Danny then goes to Vlad's castle, which I don't understand how he has that since he never got ghost powers in this reality and never overshadowed people to fork over their money to him. The episode suggests he became the new Dairy King, but I still don't see how he'd be able to afford a castle. I also don't understand how he has white hair still, since he did get that when the ghost portal blasted him originally. Maddie catches Danny in her secret lab, and Jack goes there for some reason. No idea how he knew Danny would be there. Danny in his human form also called Maddie Mom when he arrived at the door, and also says, while being in his ghost form, after being trapped, that he's Jack and Maddie's son. Maddie somehow realizes Danny Fenton and Phantom are the same person. It's not like he turned into his human form in front of her, or transformed into his ghost form in front of her. Vlad Masters, even without ghost powers, is still very bitter and angry. The way I see Vlad is he was a perfectly fine person before that accident. He never would have become evil had he not been blasted and alone for all those years. He even said in Ultimate Enemy, 10 years without ghost powers made me realize what a fool I'd been. Here, he just acts like the bad guy again. He even told Maddie Jack never wanted to see her again and that Jack blamed Maddie for the incident. He's still completely against Jack for some reason. It makes sense in the original timeline since he feels Jack hurt him and took the woman he loved, and that causes him to be bitter and hate him. I understand there needs to be a conflict here, but this isn't good writing. This is just flat out Flanderization. Here's my version of this episode since I feel there was a good idea here. Danny goes back in time, but Clockwork tells him he'll have to learn messing with timelines can have dire consequences, like how it actually happened, except later on Clockwork tells Danny he trapped him there to teach him a lesson. That timeline still happens since it was created. It's not like it just goes away when Danny decides to fix things. Jack's a little bit better, but not as much as Vlad was originally, since Vlad blamed Jack for the incident, and Jack only had himself to blame. But he vows to help Danny get to the ghost zone and get back to his timeline. Vlad and Jack are still good friends. He has no reason at all to hate him. Maddie here loves Vlad, as she did agree to marry him, but she doesn't have anything against Jack, nor did Vlad tell her those bad things about him. Vlad and Maddie are living in an ordinary house, and Vlad thinks a ghost, Jack, is attacking, when he's just doing it to distract him, and doesn't know that's Jack. While all this is going on, Danny makes his move to get through the ghost portal and get back to his reality. Danny then learns time travel is more complicated than he thought it would be, and he still learns to appreciate his parents. I do like the lesson of Danny coming to terms with his parents' past, but there's too many other problems in this episode, and it's not that entertaining or funny either. It's a shame since I'm normally a sucker for Vlad episodes, but this just isn't good. It's a
Fenton episode.
It's a bad episode whether you heavily consider the time travel stuff, or even if you don't think about it too much. The ending is also kind of stupid. Not because Danny also goes to 80s night and has fun with his parents. That's perfectly fine. The thing that's stupid is that other people also go there, and Jazz goes there too for some reason. And they think that Jack, Maddie, and Danny are being weird. Why would they go there if they didn't want to see people having an 80s style dance night? Special number 3, episode 37 to 38, Reality Trip. Freak Show aims to collect all the reality gems to wipe out half the universe. Alright, that's not the actual plot. Get that out of here. Freak Show kidnaps Danny, Tucker, and Sam's parents, so they go on a cross-country trip to acquire the reality gems to bring to him, while also being on the run from the guys in white after Danny's secret identity is revealed to the entire world. So here's a personal fun fact about this episode. Dash's quote over there when he finds out Danny's secret identity is where I got my idea of what to call bad episodes of this show for this review series. Okay, but let's start talking about the episode itself. I find it really funny that Jack keeps a ghost blaster in the shower and uses it on Danny when he sees him flying in the air. Freak Show was also in jail for a few months, and the guys in white talked to him about the reality gauntlet. But why is Freak Show glowing like ghosts do? He's just an ordinary human being who used to have a staff that controls ghosts. He never glowed in Control Freaks. Speaking of which, it's nice to see the guys in white again. But why did the guys in white allow a criminal to hold such a powerful weapon? They wanted to get rid of ghosts forever, especially Danny Phantom, sure, but why would Freak Show be worthy of holding it? Let's just say they end up regretting their decision. I would have just had Freak Show trick them into giving it to him. Anyway, it's now summer vacation, and our main heroes intend to start it off with a concert, along with say what their travel plans are for the summer. Freak Show and his reality gauntlet crash it, along with some really good animation to go with it. They were able to hide the gems from Freak Show to stop him from controlling all reality, but Danny crashes on the stage and transforms back into his human form, so everyone now knows the secret. Dash has that funny but inspiring quote over there, and Paulina's really happy about it. When they help him out a little later, Paulina references pirate radio and says she can now wrap her mind around Paulina Fenton. Freak Show and his ghost friend kidnap Danny, Tucker, and Sam's parents to get them to bring the gems to him. The guys in white are also now on Danny's tail. They wait at the house to arrest him, but the house has a really good defense system, so they get beaten around in a really entertaining scene. They then use the Fenton Op Center to turn into a jet to escape, but the guys in white put a tracker on it. Danny has trust issues with his parents, as he thinks they'll want to rip him apart molecule by molecule and or dissect him, especially after what Jack said to him at the beginning of the episode. But Freak Show gives them a call and tells them he has their parents and gives them 3 days to return the gems, or their parents will die. The first gem they go to is at the Space Center in Florida, and it makes a space shuttle alive, but Danny takes it out and then gets to land it. So he gets to at least enjoy some part of this trip. Jazz tells Jack and Maddie why Danny didn't tell him about his ghost powers, how they wanted to rip him apart molecule by molecule and dissect the ghost. Jazz also realizes Freak Show is envious of ghosts, and this comes to play later in the episode. They then go to Gothapalooza, where it's sunshine, happiness, and teddy bears, which are 3 things only Sam would passionately hate, thanks to the gem there. But all Danny has to do to get the gem and turn everything back to normal there is to ask the teddy bears politely. Next up is San Diego Comic-Con, where tons of people are cosplaying as Danny. Some even cosplay as Sam, but sadly, nobody's a Tucker. This gem turns 3 cosplayers into comic book supervillains that Danny has to fight and turn them back to normal. Freakshow is able to immediately steal the gems from them once acquired and puts on a show for his audience. And by show, I mean kill all of Danny's friends and family while they're riding in a dangerous roller coaster in some of the best animation the show has ever put on screen. And by audience, I mean just a bunch of clowns in the background. Freakshow also looks really intimidating once he's the ringmaster of all reality. He then changes the world into things he likes, including turning the US Capitol building into a circus tent. Although I'm pretty sure the event inside still resembles a circus in some way. But I think it's really funny that when Danny acquires the gauntlet and changes everything back to normal, we actually don't see the Capitol building return to normal. That's a really subtle joke, and I find that super funny. Freakshow has major ghost envy, and Danny tricks him into turning himself into a ghost. So Danny is able to trap him in the Fenton thermos, which definitely reminds me of how Jafar got defeated in Aladdin. When Danny turns Freakshow in and erases the guys in white's memory, he makes a Star Wars reference telling him he's not the ghost they've been looking for. Butch Harmon must be a pretty big Star Wars fan. This episode has a very interesting plot, good character development, even if their memories get erased later on, and some of the best animation the show has to offer. It's a good episode. Episode 39, Double Cross My Heart. Sam starts dating a goth from Hungary, but Danny suspects he works for the guys in white. So Skulker's apparently in this episode, as he nearly gets caught by the guys in white, but he auto-ejects just in time, and the guys in white use his battlesuit to learn more about Danny Phantom, and they are on his tail the entire episode. They even hide in the school pool for some reason while Danny is fighting a ghost, and they're only there when Danny follows the ghost in it. What would they have done if a ghost either didn't appear, or if it didn't go in there? Although it does lead to a funny scene of the pool blowing up while Lancer tries to enjoy a Shakespeare book by the pool eating dry white toast. Sam starts hanging with Gregor, but the guys in white keep appearing where he is, so you can see Danny's reasoning. He ends up being wrong about him working with the guys in white, but he does end up being a phony. Danny also shows a lot of jealousy in this episode. He gets especially jealous after Gregor kisses Sam. What I don't quite get, though, is Sam at first really enjoys the kiss. You'll have to watch it and see what I mean. Then we cut to commercial break, then we come back from commercial break, and then Sam tells Gregor they're rushing it a bit. I mean, I know they were probably doing it for dramatic effect, but I don't think it really works. Danny spies on Gregor for a bit, and Tucker hangs out with the two of them to help Danny keep an eye on him, but we get a montage of Tucker being really annoying. Like shouting for some reason when Gregor is playing mini golf or playing on his PDA during a movie. Plus, he just completely forgets what his mission was for selfish reasons. The guys in white then come to Danny's school again as they know about the purple-back gorilla assignment from One of a Kind, then come to Danny's house. They at first have reason to believe Danny Fenton was hanging with the ghost boy by tracing Tucker's PDA. Then they just think Gregor has white hair and dresses in black and white, so he must be the ghost boy. I know they work for the government, but even they've got to be smarter than that. Danny then goes to protect him. Tucker decides to interrupt a private conversation that Gregor requested to have with Sam. Yeah, I really don't like Tucker in this episode, and maybe he should have gotten a bad ending in this episode instead of in Doctor's Disorders or King Tuck. And then we realize Gregor's not actually from Hungary and was faking stuff just to get on Sam's good side. He also called Tucker a loser in front of Sam. Although with how annoying Tucker was being earlier, I can't blame Gregor too much for saying that. Yeah, I know his name actually ends up being Elliot, but I'm just going to call him Gregor anyway. This is the type of episode that others like Lucky in Love or Flirting with Disaster were able to avoid, where it focuses too much on the dating part of it and doesn't have enough comedy or action working with it. It feels too soap opera-y. And look, I've seen Phantom Planet. I know how the series ends. I know that they're kind of building up to that, but I feel like episodes like Fanning the Flames did this type of stuff a lot better. I also don't like how the guys in white get treated like villains in this episode. Sure, they're not helping Danny by any means, but they think Danny's a threat. It's not like they're doing it for selfish reasons. They're like Valerie when she hunts ghosts, and they never treat her like the villain. It's a
Featured episode.
It's too soap opera-y, it's not well written, it's not very entertaining, and it treats the guys in white like bad guys. Although I will say, it's not an abysmal episode, and I probably would have given this a meh if Tucker wasn't so annoying in this episode. I know he's trying to annoy Gregor, but he shouldn't annoy the audience. He should only annoy the other characters. And finally, episode 40, Kindred Spirits. Danny meets his half-ghost hybrid cousin Danielle, but she's a clone created by Vlad as part of his plan to create a perfect clone of him. So, before I talk about this episode, note that Danny's cousin goes by Danny Phantom with an I at the end of her name, but I'm just going to call her Danielle so it's not confusing. Anyway, Vlad starts the episode with tape on Danny and trying to create a clone of him. He also has an AI system resembling Maddie and even programmed it to call him Sweetheart and say, "Jack Fenton is an idiot. I am glad I serve you." It's so funny to hear Maddie's voice saying those words. He also mentions that the equipment he gave to Valerie had been monitoring Danny for months, but he can't create a perfect clone of him without a Minmorph sample, so he sends some ghosts to try and get said Minmorph sample. Danny hadn't been very considerate or appreciative lately of his friends. We see a funny montage of him putting himself first when they were up against a few ghosts. We even see the ghost dog from Shades of Grey again in there. He fights another ghost at the miniature golf course he, Tucker, and Sam go to, but it destroys the course and Danny has to take off, thus still putting his friend second. Danny goes home to see his cousin Danielle just laying in his bed reading a space shuttle magazine. She's pretty adorable and voiced really well. Too bad Anna Sophia Robb only voices her for this episode, as her next appearance she's voiced by Krista Swan. Danny suggests talking to his parents, but he gets attacked by another of Vlad's clones. But Danielle is also a half-ghost hybrid, so she helps Danny fight, gaining his trust. Vlad appears when they're fighting the next ghost, and Danielle hurts Danny, so Vlad can easily capture him. Sam and Tucker then tell Lancer they're ditching school and even call him an old man after seeing Danny get kidnapped. They're willing to get in a lot of trouble in order to help their friend, even after he hadn't been treating them well lately. What good friends they are. They even go to Danny's house and steal the Spectre speeder to drive there. They also use the boomerang from Ultimate Enemy to track Danny's location, so that way, I'm not wondering how they know where Vlad's cabin is. Vlad takes him to the cabin he had in Maternal Instinct, and even traps him in the same box he had in Bitter Reunions. I really like those Easter eggs. And speaking of Easter eggs, Danny then calls Vlad a Fruit Loop again. And Vlad explains why he's not a Fruit Loop, since he used his powers to overshadow millionaires and conduct invisible burglaries. He then claims he's not a villain and just wanted love. But those are things a Fruit Loop would say and do. But in all seriousness, this is one big reason why I don't like Masters of All Time. He's too flanderized in that episode. Glad he's at least back on track here though. He also explains that he wants a perfect half-ghost son and had many mistake clones. Once he gets a Minmorph sample, then regular Danny would be obsolete. Danielle watches this conversation and thinks she's a mistake. Vlad tells her he needs Danny's DNA to stabilize her, although he's obviously just using her, and Danny tells us this a little bit later. But I really like how convincing Vlad was. This is really good writing. Once she captures him, Vlad tries to tell her to overshadow him to force a transformation, but the last clone who tried that failed. Vlad then gets mad at her, albeit a little fast, and she realizes Danny was right, so they both have a very entertaining fight scene against Vlad, also destroying his good Danny clone in the process. Vlad gets really mad at this, probably the maddest he's ever been in the series, which I really like, and the animation is really good on it, and Danielle is even a bit afraid of him. But Danny uses his ghostly wail to blow him back. While that happens, there's a bunch of system failures, including the Maddie AI hilariously admitting she never actually loved Vlad and loves the Jack program. Then an AI Jack appears and shouts, "Vladdy!" and kisses the Maddie AI. If I were to do a top 5 Danny Phantom jokes, that would make the list easily. Tucker and Sam arrive to help Danny and stop Vlad by hitting him with the Spectre speeder and putting the Spectre deflector on him. Also very akin to Maternal Instinct. Danny starts thanking them a whole lot and realizing he should be more appreciative, and they go home to be in a lot of trouble, but Danielle overshadows Maddie and Mr. Lancer to get them out of trouble. They will overshadow, then convince Jack that he can just build a better Spectre speeder, so Danielle didn't even need to overshadow him. But yeah, it's a good episode. And that's every episode of Danny Phantom Season 2 reviewed. Let's look at the pie chart. We have 13 good episodes, 1 meh episode, and 3 Piechart episodes. That itself is pretty good, even if the Piechart episodes pile on towards the end of the season. And now we'll compare Season 2 to Season 1. And there are less episodes to give ratings to, so you just gotta look at the percentages. And yeah, it's not quite as good, but we all knew Season 1 would be tough to top. Although it actually did start off even better than Season 1 did. As for the seasonal rating, it may not be as good as Season 1 was, but it's still a very good season. It may not have ended very strongly, but I still find the season to be very enjoyable, both episode by episode and narratively. Plus, the best episodes here are just as good, if not better, than the best episodes in Season 1. And now we go on to notes. My first note is that Ember has a lot more speaking appearances this season. She has Pirate Radio, Rainstorm, The Ultimate Enemy, and The Fright Before Christmas. Skulker appears in 7 episodes this season. He's in Rainstorm, Identity Crisis, Ultimate Enemy, granted he's fused with Technus, Fright Before Christmas, Secret Weapons, Micromanagement, Double Cross My Heart, and a non-speaking appearance in Kindred Spirits. The animation is some of the show's best this season. Like some of these shots, some of the fighting, some of the colors, they look great. And my final note is that there's not as many subplots in episodes this season. We get a subplot in Micromanagement and a bit of one in Kindred Spirits, but really not a whole lot outside of that. But hey, I am perfectly okay with that. Now we go to my top 5. Number 5, Rainstorm. Number 4, Kindred Spirits. Number 3, Secret Weapons. Number 2, The Fright Before Christmas. And number 1, obviously, The Ultimate Enemy. Yeah, you're probably not surprised by that, are you? I think these 5 episodes not only represent the best in this season, but also among the best in the entire show. And these episodes are just as good, if not better, than even some of the best episodes in Season 1. And that's Season 2 for you. It may not be as good as Season 1, but it's still very good. Well, I'll see you guys in Season 3. Hopefully it's not as bad as people say it is. T-Star, out.